Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. My name is Jessica and I'm your host, and you can follow me on Twitter at It's Justino. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Zeki Celik. I think that's how you say his name, but the right back from Lille. We'll talk a little bit about him. We've been linked with him this morning as a right back option, so we'll talk a little bit about him. We'll talk about Onana, his CAS hearing, and all those types of things, and just kind of how we feel about bringing in a goalkeeper so shortly after getting rid of Emmy. I can't get over it. And we'll talk about some outgoings as well. Reiss Nelson is being linked with a move or a loan away to Olympiacos. So we'll touch on that. And when Simon gets here, Simon Collings from the Evening Standard, we'll get him to talk about Celik because he's the one who actually dropped the news. He's the one who dropped it this morning. So we'll let him give us the ins and outs of that particular link. And we'll do some Q&A. I also have MK here from Arsenal Los Angeles. She's been on my show before. She was actually the first person that I had on when I started my show on my actual channel. And we had a ball talking then. We're actually talking about the season, so we're going to be talking about other stuff today. But I love MK, another strong female voice out here in the Arsenal atmosphere. So, can't get any better than that. So I'm going to go ahead and bring her in. Hi, MK. How are you?
Good. It's good to be on again. Thank you for having me.
No problem, of course. So before Simon gets here, I just want to talk a little bit about, how you're feeling about this project and how big the project actually is. Every single day we're kind of being linked with new players, and it seems like the list of players that we need to be able to bring in is getting bigger and bigger. How are you feeling about the scope of the project that needs to be done this summer and Edu and Arteta's ability to get that done?
So I think the project is pretty huge considering the shape of our current squad. I think you look at the wages some of these players are on, and I look at it sort of more as a selling season or selling transfer window than I do a buying one. We will need to purchase some players, but if you look at who we've been linked to, it's a question of whether we can reasonably afford some of these players. And we don't have Europe, obviously. We don't know whether we should be excited. As Josh has mentioned, we should be, right? Like, we don't know what kind of investment we could potentially see from them if they actually, for the first time, decide to invest their own money in the club. So Edu and Arteta are kind of at the whims of whether or not the ownership is actually going to invest without Europe. So I think it's more of a selling transfer window, in that the rebuild may not even fully start until December, which is why I think they are keeping Arteta around. One, because they're not going to spend big on an experienced manager. Two, an experienced manager isn't going to want to come without Europe. So we kind of are stuck with him. So do I think he's the right man for the job? I'm not entirely convinced, and there's a number of reasons for that. But this is a huge rebuild, and it's going to take multiple windows, and I think we have to be realistic about both our finances, and regardless of who is in charge, they're going to have the same issues if ownership does not invest. So,
yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think it's important for us to get more realistic about what this is actually going to look like. It's not just going to be one window, it's going to be multiple windows. And the scope of the project for me is massive. Like, the way I think, like, every single day there's something else going on. We're talking about attacking midfielders, central midfielders, and fullbacks. But depending on if Lacazette leaves or goes, then, maybe we're looking at a striker, maybe we're looking at a goalkeeper. We'll talk about that too. But Simon is actually here, so I'm going to go ahead and bring him in. Hey, Simon, how are you?
Hello. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for being on the show, agreeing to chat with us. And yeah, thank you so much. I know you're super busy, but this is wonderful to get you on. I know you broke the news about Celik. How do you pronounce his name?
That is a good question. If you've got any Turkish speakers or experts, that would be good. I've heard sort of 3-4 different pronunciations of it, but I think it's Celik, but I don't know. Zeki is certainly his first name anyway. So,
well, we'll go with that. But before we actually get into the meat of that link, just how do you feel about the scope of the project that is Arsenal this summer? It feels so heavy. It always feels heavy every single summer, but this summer seems particularly heavy. So for you, how big is this project, and how confident are you that Arteta and Adu have the tools to maneuver around some really complicated circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge project, and for me, this is probably the defining point of it, the defining moment of whether it's going to be a successful project or a failure. I mean, I found it difficult to judge Arteta and Edu so far, simply because of the environment we've been living in. And I know people will say every club's been living in this COVID era, but I don't think there's as many clubs who've had, the situations Arsenal have had with things like Ozil, with things like Aubameyang getting malaria, with a bloated squad where you haven't got players registered. So I found it difficult to fully judge them. But I think after this window, which should, fingers crossed, be a normal window compared to the ones we've had in the past, they'll have a full pre-season, they'll have one game a week. I don't think any of those mitigating factors or explanations we've had over the first sort of 18 months of Arteta and Edu's reign can be taken into account. So I don't think they'll have any excuses. So they will have to be ready to be judged and have to be ready to deliver, because if they don't get it right, I don't think they've got anything to fall back on why they haven't got it right. And this summer is huge, as you guys rightly say. There's so much to do and so much business to be done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just like how, because MK was just kind of already saying, like, it's going to take multiple windows, so we can't expect to do every single thing in one shot. And that's one thing I really do feel like Arsenal fans need to get realistic about, the fact that we're looking at probably multiple players in different positions, but the likelihood of us addressing everything is so unlikely with the limited time and limited resources that we have and the types of players that we have that are going to be hard to shift on. But MK, I'll go to you first. What is the bare minimum that you think has to get done for us to move forward and progress at least enough for it to be considered a successful window and a successful season?
I think the single greatest thing that you could do to benefit this squad is youth, and get rid of some of these older players. Anyone that is over 27, 28, you need to be looking at selling them or moving them along and thinking about their replacement long term. One thing Arsenal does have going for it is an excellent development in the Hale End. And you look at the players that have come through there, and look, we can't expect everyone to be like a Saka or an Emile Smith-Rowe, but at the same time, I think that we need to get younger. I think Arsenal's bad business has been kind of confined to a lot of the 30-plus players, and we can't be doing that anymore. We have to be looking at moving some of these players along, specifically because their wage bill, we can't afford it without Europe. And so I think that at bare minimum, we need to move along some of these players, even including, in my opinion, Lacazette, whom I'd love to keep, but we can't afford him. So, now you have to cash in on him. We have to be realistic again. And these are some of the difficult decisions that we're going to have to make in order to be competitive in the future.
Yeah, Simon, I'll throw that to you as well. What is the bare minimum that you think Arsenal need to get done in this window? Just the bare minimum.
I mean, I think the issue from last summer was not getting players out the window. And I think for me, that has got to be the priority in bringing the numbers of the squad down. I think we saw the benefits even from January when, obviously they brought in Martin Odegaard in January, but for me, the biggest benefits came from getting players out the door and cutting the number of players in the squad. So I think that the key is trying to get those players moved on. And if they're going to be ruthless, which Arteta said they're going to be, players like Lacazette, have to go. Players like Bellerin probably have to go. And even someone like Xhaka, you could argue, has to go as well. But I know there's a lot to do, but I still think the minimum is probably, you need at least one goalkeeper. You need a right back, a left back, a centre mid, an attacking mid, and probably a striker. And I think you've got to try and get that all done. I think the only place, in terms of those numbers, I think you've got to get them. But I think it might be a case that some of those have to be loan deals, which was the case in January. So, but numbers wise, I think you need at least 6 players through the door for me.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be tough, I still think, but
yeah, definitely.
it's definitely that 6 players. I'm like, I would be like not happy, but surprised if we got like 4, to be honest. Like, I just think it's going to be really, really tough. But I mean, we're looking at like even a situation where this morning we're on Twitter and people are trying to figure out who maybe Arsenal's number one midfield option or recruit might be. It's not Basuma, but it's somebody else. And then another name comes out where it's like Sanderberg, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, like, of course I'd prefer Basuma, but let's be real. If Xhaka and Guendouzi leave and Ceballos is gone, the idea that as much as I want Basuma, and I think that AFCON shouldn't be a determining factor on whether you bring somebody in for like a long-term squad building, decision, we're not in a position to really take those types of risks. Maybe we're not, so if you had to bring in a Sanderberg for less and then bring in another midfielder, that might be what the club is trying to do. So I think we need to open ourselves up to maybe Arsenal thinking of things more from like how can we get more people in than maybe like their number one target, because we have to cover so many holes. Is that a good squad building decision for you, MK, or do you think you get the best possible player, or you try to get decent quality or good quality and try to cover as many holes as possible? Because for me, it's 2 for 1. I think you need to get 2 midfielders in.
I would agree. I think that targeting central defensive mid is probably, and getting Partey like a partner that he can really work with, regardless of the price. I don't think Sanderberg, I just looking it up, that Sheffield want £35 million for him. I think that's outrageous. You've gotten relegated. You're lucky that anyone wants you. It's time to sell. It's like, are you kidding me? The audacity of that. But they want to charge a Premier League premium and not be in the Premier League. That's up to them. See who bites at that. But I would prefer Basuma. I know there's a risk there. But my feelings are that you want to be a big club. You got to act like a big club and take big risks. And I think that Basuma would be an excellent partnership for Partey. I think he would be a good target. But at the same time, I think you also have to look at getting that second loan deal done for Odegaard. I think that that's important. I know that Arteta has emphasized that he would like to get that done. I think that would be smart business as well. But yeah, you also do have to look at the secondarily important position, or equally important, depending on how you look at it, is that you would need to get a right back for sure, or at the very least, someone who can preferably play both positions, like a Cedric, because Tierney is obviously not always match fit. So those fullback positions are important as well.
Simon, what are your ideas on somebody like a Sanderberg? It seems like the Arsenal fan base is not feeling this particular person. And for me, I'm looking at it like from a profile perspective, I think he's just fine. But for the price, probably not really what you're looking for. So what are your thoughts on Sanderberg being a potential target for Arsenal? And are there any pros to maybe somebody like him coming in at the right price?
Yeah, I mean, he's good mates with Martin Odegaard, so if that's going to help. I mean, Sanderberg, I've only seen him live, I think maybe once or twice. I quite liked him as a player, but one thing that I am wary about is, and it's not to be too disrespectful to Sheffield United, but when he left to come to Sheffield United, the fact that they were the club that got him over to the Premier League over, clubs around Europe, slightly rings alarm bells for me. I think they paid about 20 million, which is obviously a lot of money. But the fact that he went there and there wasn't someone else who came and took him slightly unnerves me about whether he's up to the quality of playing for Arsenal. I think as a young player coming through, I know he was very, very highly rated. Physically, he would add something to the Arsenal midfield. But I've personally felt with the midfield, particularly with Xhaka, the issue has been mobility and speed around it. So he's not someone I'd want to go for on that mod. I'm much more a fan of Basuma. I think on the last day of the season, we saw his athleticism, his ability. And I kind of feel with Partey, as much as he is athletic and dynamic, to have someone around him in that mould who is going to be breaking up play and actually allowing Partey to get on the front foot, I think will be very big. So that's how I'd look at it. But it's going to be an interesting one, central midfield. I think before the news about Xhaka came out was that, Arsenal would get one central midfielder, but now Xhaka's going, you're probably going to need 2. So, who those 2 are is going to be a big question. But for me, Basuma would be one of them. I think he's someone who could really strengthen the team.
Is El Neni staying? I know that no one wants to have to fall back on that, but is that, his value is at an all-time high right now after a pretty decent number of appearances. Is he sticking around as far as we know?
I think he will. I think if Arsenal had been in the Europa League or some form of European competition, I think would have been absolutely nailed on, because you need the bodies. And I think arguably Elnene's biggest value last season was the fact he could come into the squad and play those sort of midweek games. I think that is in one way a benefit for Arsenal, the fact they don't have these extra games. You can be really ruthless with the squad, because if you look at someone like Aston Villa, Leeds, these guys are performing in the Premier League with sort of 16, 17 first team players and then 3 or 4 youngsters. So you can be really ruthless. But personally, for me, with Elneny, he is a very good person around the training ground. I know that gets said a lot about him, but he is one of the most likable people. I think fans even can see that when he scores goals, the way he gets mobbed. And he's got 1 year in his contract. I mean, what are you going to get for him? £5-6 million? It's probably worth, for me, you may as well keep him for a year and let him go for free. I'm not sure there's a huge amount of value selling him this summer, or is there a huge amount of value in extending his contract? So I think he's one you probably keep around just for having a body, and also for the point of view, if you look at it, you're losing Xhaka, you lose Guendouzi, you lose Elneny, you lose Torreira. I mean, there's literally no one left. So I think you need a little bit of continuity for next season.
Yeah, I think my thought process behind the whole Berge thing originally was like, oh, if you get Basuma and Berge, perfect. Especially my whole thing with Berge is like, he would be a decent addition at the right price. 35 million is outrageous, but 20 million for me is like, okay, that's fine. Because for a young player, like 23 years old, if you bring them in at 20 million or something like that, that's for me a lot less of a risk. You could still sell them in 2 years if it doesn't work out. 35 million, we're kind of talking about something a little bit different. But for me, long-term squad building, we shouldn't be thinking about AFCON. There's a lot of people that are like, we shouldn't be worried about it. But if the club was thinking about it from that perspective, I wouldn't blame them, because we're looking at Thomas Partey, Elneny, Aubameyang, Pepe, all these players being out at the same time. And if you think back to Arsene Wenger, he would say that some of them would come back and it would take them months to get back into the groove of things. So if we talk about bringing in somebody like Basuma and only bringing in Basuma, the whole midfield is gone still, So if they were thinking about it from that perspective, that makes sense. If Berge is who you bring in at 20 million and you still bring in somebody else, I guess I would live with it. But Basuma's definitely quality over them for sure. Like, I see that, but I wouldn't really blame them for thinking about it like that. MK, were you going to say something?
I just think that it shouldn't really be a deciding factor. I mean, I just think that's such a conservative way of looking at things. You're talking about a player of immense quality who really would be the correct partner for Partey in mid for that overlap, as Simon mentioned before, to give him that mobility. And I just think that there are other clubs that, have a lot of African players that are going to be dealing with this too. And we don't have Europe. It's not like we're playing, Thursday night games. So, we have the ability to give players more rest. And so I think it's a bit different. I think it would be different if we were in Europe and these players are coming back from AFCON. But the fact that they miss a few matches, to me, is not of consequence long term.
Yeah, for sure. There's about 60 of you guys watching right now. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. But I want to pivot a little bit to Celik. So Simon, you broke the story this morning about Arsenal being in for Celik. Can you tell us a little bit about the links and just the ins and outs of kind of what you found out or what you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is there's a lot of clubs who I think are very interested in, which is probably no real surprise given Lille won Liga. It reminds me a bit of when Monaco, won Liga a few seasons ago, and that team pretty quickly broke up. And I think it's going to be the same with Lille, partly because Lille need to sell to raise funds anyway. And Celik is someone who's available at a very decent price. I think, 15 million euros will probably be enough to get him out of there. And, what I was told was that near enough every club who is looking for a right back has him on their shortlist in some capacity, whether it's near the top or near the bottom. Primarily because he is sort of, the modern style of fullback. He's very good at getting forward. He's direct, he's attacking. Defensively, though, I think he is better than some people give him credit for. I think the question marks about him in the air, but one-on-one defending is pretty good. And I think what it will give Arsenal is the attack at the moment for me is very skewed down the left-hand side with Tierney because of the way he builds up. I think Chambers has changed that a bit. But if they've got someone of that same, directness, someone who will get on the overlap, cause problems, I think it will just give more balance to the side, and that's what they're looking at. And Max Aarons, who's another player in the club, again provides that. He's an athletic player. He'll get forward, he'll overlap, and it will just provide some balance to that defence. So Arsenal certainly interested in him. I think there's definitely Manchester United and Tottenham also interested, clubs in Europe as well. So the key, I think, for me, and what the interesting thing will be, is whether anything happens before the Euros, because he is playing for Turkey. And we've seen, I don't know how many times over the past few years, if someone has a good tournament, that price can go up. So for me, the next 10 days will be interesting to see if the deal accelerates and if the interest accelerates. But it's one to watch, certainly. And I think one Arsenal is certainly keeping a firm eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking about that, just about the Euros situation. I mean, I think we're looking at a situation where we may be waiting until after the Euros to be getting deals done, because some players just don't want to make a move until people get to see them in that Euro tournament, and Turkey is supposed to be one of the dark horses or a team to watch. So he might be somebody that, his value does skyrocket. But what would it take at the moment to get him to Arsenal? 15 million, something around
that? Yeah, 50 million euros, I think, was the price that I was told that would be enough for Lille to consider selling, which, I mean, for me, I think is pretty good value for a player of that quality. I know he's only really made his sort of recent success at Lille, and beyond that, he doesn't have a huge track record, but he's 24 years old, so you'd like to think he's someone who's going to improve on that. And I think certainly for him, he has a desire to play in England, is my understanding. He wants to test himself in the Premier League, and Norwich were even one of the clubs who I think earlier on in the window sort of just reached out to his people to find out, would he be interested to come into Norwich, because they're braced for losing Max Aarons. And I don't think that really they fit with his aspirations. I think he believes he can play at a higher level than that. So I think for Arsenal, that if they were to move swiftly, they could probably get this done before the Euros. But there's also the difficulties, which I think clubs are already experiencing, of trying to get medicals done, trying to speak to players when they're in their bubbles before the Euros, and clubs are international teams are very wary about someone leaving that bubble to do a medical. So it makes it complicated. Do you get the country to do it? So deals are harder to do, but it'd be one where you could perhaps try and get something, certainly in motion before the tournament starts and its value rises.
Yeah, I like the players that were being linked with for the right back position, to be honest. I think what you're looking for is links that make sense. And obviously some are just total crap, and then others have some legs to it. So for me, it's like being linked with Majraoui or Celik or even Aarons to a certain extent is good, because they're the right profile. We have a real issue at right back. We really, really do. We have 3 options there, and none of them seem to really be what we're looking for there. I think we already know that Hector Bellerin is probably somebody who's on the way out, but what does that really mean for like somebody like Cedric? I think that deal looks funky now that Chambers just kicked him straight out of that backup right back spot. So do you think there's maybe an opportunity for us to shift Cedric on? Because if we're not in Europe, I don't really see a place for Cedric to really be here. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to think where Cedric would go, but I mean, I can't see him being happy with the situation he's in. I don't think he played since that Slavia Prague game, the first leg where I know he was at fault for the goal. And I mean, Arteta, I think, was fuming on the sideline. I remember Xhaka and a few others on the pitch were sort of at the full-time whistle were berating him, and he hasn't been in the team since then. So whether that was a turning point for Arteta and he suddenly realised, no, that's it, I can't have you in the team. Because I think before that, for me, he'd been okay for a free signing. I think he'd filled in a bit, he'd done a job. But I agree with you in the sense that if you don't have those Europa League games, it's a bit like El Neni, there's not really a role for him. The difficulty you're going to have is, he's 3 years on his contract. Maybe a case you can loan him and get him out the door that way. But I can't see there being a huge market for Cedric Suarez. But I agree with you. I think he's certainly not the number 1 right back. He's not going to be the number 2 anymore. And this idea that he was going to be the sort of left back cover as well seems to have gone out the window. So it doesn't look good for him, I think, is probably the way to put it.
I mean, that's how they marketed him to us. Like, you can play on the left and the right. Like, look at this free signing. And it just hasn't worked out. I don't think Cedric is a bad player. I just think, I hope they're learning lessons. I think that's my thing, is I hope this group is learning lessons and they're, you know, get one big lesson I think we can all say is get Kia out of the club. Get Kia out of the club, man. Like, he's the one who's bringing these guys over and telling us he can play left and right when that's really not true. And it's just kind of like one of those things where I think he'll stay longer than we probably want and we won't really use him. You know, MK, how do you feel about Chambers being able to have this like resurgence and kind of be like that backup right back? For you, is it Cedric or is it Chambers? And would you like to move on from like maybe Cedric because he's not playing?
I think the problem with Cedric, as Simon kind of alluded to with the way the players reacted to him, and certainly the way Arteta has reacted to him, I think that there's probably a lot that we don't know that's gone on behind the scenes, that this player may or may not have an attitude problem. And, you know, we've seen what happened with Guendouzi. And I think that we can't afford to be dealing with players that have an ego like this right now. Like, if you want to come play for Arsenal, you play for the badge and you play for the potential to be a pivotal part in this rebuild process. And that's something that we can offer someone with the right attitude. And I don't think that that person is Cedric. I think you look at Chambers and he's not your first choice at right back, but he's been a pretty solid squad player, and he puts in those performances when he's asked to. And so I think you have to try and move Cedric along, even if it is a loan deal. And I think it also speaks to the devastation in our scouting. I mean, I understand the pandemic has obviously played a part in the necessity to have to, you know, scouts couldn't go and watch games. I get that. But like, that's an area that needs to be targeted within the organization, because a good scout would be able to truly tell you whether or not Cedric was capable of playing both sides, right? They could tell you his weaknesses and his strengths. And we really need to get smarter about that, because we've made a lot of bad deals. So,
yeah, we definitely have made some questionable signings. I'm hoping that those are fewer and far between from now on. But let's talk about Andre Onana a little bit. I didn't know we were going to be in for a goalkeeper besides Matty Ryan this summer. And now it looks like we're looking for a goalkeeper. And Andre Onana has come up as an option, and that deal seems to be progressing pretty quickly. The only issue with him is that he is on trial or something for a doping ban. And depending on how that goes, he could be back in October versus February, which makes a difference. But Simon, I wanted to kind of get your temperature on this. Like, is Onana a future planning decision with Leno having 2 years left on his deal? Maybe something for not this summer to come in, or not this next season, but the season after, to make sure that you have somebody on a cut price deal? Or is there the potential for Leno to leave this summer? Is he somebody that could be a potential out going this summer?
Yeah, I don't think beyond signing a number 2 goalkeeper, Arsenal expected to be needing to bring in another goalkeeper. And I think they would certainly like to keep Matt Ryan. I think the only thing that's probably slight stumbling block for that is that he's not homegrown, and they would prefer to have the number 2 as a homegrown, as a lot of clubs do, or at least have the number 3 as a homegrown, which could be interesting for Renaissance situation. But Leno, I mean, he sort of intimated it, and I think it was a press conference around sort of April time, where he just sort of was asked a question about his contract and if there'd been any sort of talks, and he just threw out there that he was sort of open to a new challenge if one came. He wasn't saying he wanted to leave, but he was sort of saying, you know, if something came along, I would consider it. And I think that was a sort of hinting at what is going on behind the scenes. And I think he's not someone who's going to sort of go and force through a move, but I think he is a case where he would be open to perhaps doing something new. I think he's been at Arsenal now, is it 3-4 years? He's had a pretty difficult time, you know, changing managers. His defence has changed a lot. He's not really had a consistent back 4 centre-backs playing in front of him. So I think he would be open to moving in. And it comes to that point, which Arsenal haven't been good at, is when you get a player with 2 years on their deal, you either say, right, extend it, or we're going to move you on. And I think the Onana links and the interest there has come out of the fact that Arsenal kind of feel they might have to move Leno on and get in a goalkeeper. I think they would have really liked David Raya of Brentford, who they tried for last summer, but now they're promoted. That's not going to happen. And Onana is one that is just a good piece of business. my colleague Jack, I remember, I think it was a year ago, was reporting that Chelsea were looking at him before they got Mendy in, and Chelsea were being quoted 30 million pounds for him. And he's now worth, I mean, if his ban goes through, he'll probably be worth sort of 2-3 million is what's being said. And if he gets the ban overturned, he'll probably be about 7 million, simply because he's got a year in his deal. Ajax aren't going to extend it. So I think it's one that makes a lot of sense given Arsenal's situation. There's obviously risks around it, given the fact that Arsenal could be signing a goalkeeper who's banned until the start of next year. But some would argue Matt Ryan showed in the glimpses we got of him that he could probably be the number one for 3-4 months. So it's going to be interesting. I think a lot will come down to what Leno does. I wouldn't rule out him staying, but I think that's a situation that is a real possibility that he could leave this summer.
So the more I think about this, so I was a big, it makes sense for us to keep Leno and sell Emmy last season, because I could understand why we did that. Because if Emmy wants to be number one and you can't offer that to him and there's an offer on the table, you take it. Now I'm looking at it like, could we have not have asked Leno to extend before we sold Emmy? Because now it's looking a little bit like maybe not the smartest idea. We were committed to Leno, but Leno's maybe not committed to us. And with 2 years left on your deal, I think before you sell arguably our better goalkeeper, you might want to say something like, hey, we're going to keep you. We believe in you, but we need you to resign. So that may just be me thinking like that's how it could work. But now it's calling into question maybe their judgment. MK, what do you kind of think about that? Do you think that it's just hindsight now is 2020? We probably should have did something different, or is this kind of like a black mark on the CV of Edu and Arteta in terms of their judgment? Because 9 months of Emmy and Leno battling it out, to me, doesn't seem like such a big deal now if we knew that we could keep Emmy and just sell Leno this summer.
I think that personally, I was one of the few people on a lot of Arsenal forums, last year saying that we should have kept Emmy. And my reasoning for that was his footwork and his distribution. And I think that if you're of the mindset that Arteta kind of wants to mirror what Pep has done with City and having a goalkeeper with really good distribution like that, it made more sense for the type of game that he supposedly wanted to play to take the choice of Martinez over Leno, who is not very good with his distribution, who has made a lot of critical errors this season. Granted, some of that was also his defense, but I think it was a bad decision to move him along. But hindsight is always 2020. But I did believe that at the time too, and I got a lot of crap for it, saying that because I think a lot of people wanted to stick with Leno, obviously because of there's politics involved too. I get it, but. I think at the very least you're right. Like if you were going to make that decision, you should have at least encouraged him to sign, to resign. And it's just, I think it's more bad business. I think again that these problems go so much deeper than just the squad, that there really is a problem within the executive leadership of this club that is not doing good business. And I'm not confident in Edu, no. I mean, sure, he's given us some good players, but I don't trust his judgment, because I've seen where he's gotten it wrong. We've all seen where he's gotten it wrong. And it's just, and also with Arteta, what is his ideal starting 11? Do we know that? I mean, I know he doesn't have a great squad, but what is the process that we're supposed to trust? I don't know.
I mean, it's just one of those things where I try to think of it from their perspective, and I just am like, maybe I'm just making it more simplified than it really is. But you should ask Leno to sign a new deal before you gave away Emmy. I mean, now it's looking like you gave him away. I mean, Emmy's he's probably worth like 40 now. Like the guy's really good, but we'll not rehash it and all that. Well, we've already kind of have, but let's not go any further with it. Let's just hope that if we do get Onana, it works out for us. And, he's a good goalkeeper, and whatever happens with Leno is whatever happens with Leno. But let's talk about a potential outgoing with not Xhaka, not Guendouzi, but Reiss Nelson. Somebody that I feel like the fan base has kind of forgotten about. I mean, for certain parts of the season, I'd forgotten that Reiss Nelson was even a part of the team, to be honest, because he was so uninvolved, but he's somebody that when Arteta first came in, he had his arm around his shoulder. It seemed like that was going to be his project, you know, the guy that he was going to. I mean, at that point, Saka wasn't even really in the fold like that. Fast forward to now, we're trying to figure out what's going on with Reiss Nelson being linked with a loan move to Olympiacos. Simon, do you have any, you know, thoughts on that? Is there any validity to it? What are your thoughts on Reiss Nelson going to Olympiacos?
It's not something I've heard, but I mean, it could quite easily be true. I think it's started coming. I think it's been reported here a bit, but it's been reported in Greece as well, which I think gives it some credibility and certainly some truth to it. I mean, Nelson is a really interesting one, and I think, like you said, it when Arteta came in. I think I interviewed Nelson about sort of 2 months after Arteta had got the job, and it was very much, you know, Nelson himself, you know, had this certainly sense and feeling he was going to be Arteta's pet project. And everyone knows that when Arteta was at City, the work he did with Sane and Sterling and transforming them into these goal-scoring wingers, Nelson had this dream and this hope that that was what was going to happen with Arteta. And Arteta knew him when Nelson was sort of 11, 12 years old. He did a couple of sessions with the youth team, so there was that link there. But it's never really clicked and never worked between the two. And I don't really know what it is, because Arteta hasn't massively come out and talked about it, and we've not heard from Nelson on it. But there was an interesting point. I always remember I think it was a few months into when Arteta had got the job, and he was talking about Nelson and was saying how he's 100% got the talent and the ability, but almost when he was coming through the ranks as a youngster at Arsenal, the hardest thing for Nelson was that it was almost too easy for him, and that when he was playing these younger age group level, he would literally be dribbling around all these kids and scoring all these goals. And I just wonder, we've seen it a bit with Pepe, that a big thing for Arteta has been Pepe's attitude and consistency. And I wonder if that is it with Nelson, that it's simply he hasn't quite got that buy-in from Nelson that he wants. I know Saka is, you know, the dream golden child. We all know that. Smith Rowe as well seems to be in that mould. And maybe it just isn't quite there with Nelson. I do really feel like this season has almost been a waste for him. Like if he'd just gone on loan, even to a championship club, and played 30, 35 games, for him it would have been better. For the club it would have been better. But now it's in a situation where his value doesn't feel very high. I think his career has stalled. And for me right now, it kind of feels best for everyone that he moves, whether that is on loan or as a permanent deal, because it's just completely come and ground to a halt. And it's a shame for someone who I think every fan was excited about, you know, 2 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he was always kind of touted as the most talented one coming out of that academy. So for me, I'm kind of feeling like a loan is probably where I'd want to see, you know, just see if it could happen for Willock. You know, Willock can go out to Newcastle and find some, you know, some form, 3, 4, 5, 6 games or whatever. And then maybe he can, whether that's with us long-term or with somebody else, he could just rejuvenate his career. Cause I think there's too much talent there to just kind of waste. But MK, there's a narrative kind of that's going around about Nelson that with Pepe, with Martinelli, Nelson is also somebody that Arteta has maybe unfairly treated. How do you feel about the treatment of Nelson? Can we say that he was unfairly treated, or maybe he just didn't take his opportunities?
Well, I think a lot of people in the comments got it right. Look, you have someone like Willian that has sorely stunted the development of a lot of players because he's taking up space on that pitch. And I think that is part of it. But I also think that, you know, Nelson himself maybe has unrealistic expectations of where he should fit into this squad. And I don't know what kind of promises he's been made, but I personally would like to see him go on loan, because even if we do get rid of him, I don't want to get rid of him for next to nothing, which it would be for if we got rid of him now. But I would also prefer him to be loaned to either a championship or a Premier League club, because I think you want to assess him from the point of the English game. And obviously Olympiacos is a very good team, but I mean, what kind of competition are you really facing in the Greek league? You know what I mean? And it's just not, I just don't think it would be a great assessment of his potential. So if you are going to send him out on loan, I think you need to send him out on loan domestically, as we did with Willock, and see what happens.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that, because there's kind of like reports coming out that, you know, deals plus player, or deals like player plus money, or loans, and like you could use players to kind of like shift things around. And maybe we could use a Nelson or even an Nketiah to make weight for somebody, or, you know, just soften the deal, sweeten the deal for some things. But it doesn't
Isn't
seem
Ketty
like,
at sweetening the deal?
I mean, for Brighton, maybe they need a striker. They need a striker. I think he would actually fit in perfect at Brighton, but I don't know if they're even interested in our players like that. It would be nice if we could, like, you know, send him to Norwich and bring it Buendia, like something like that. But Olympiacos seems like a strange choice to me, to be honest, as well. You know, I'd like him to be closer to home, but maybe that's something that he needs. Maybe he needs to go further out. I don't know. Socrates will take care of him. I think he'd be fine, right? He'll be fine.
His best season, I think, was over in Germany, wasn't it? When he was at Hoffenheim, he seemed to. I don't know if it was just being away from England. He seemed to sort of flourish. And I mean, if I was another Premier League or Championship club, Nelson is someone I would definitely be taking a punt on, because I think he's got the talent and the ability. And if you could get him, I don't know what his value would be worth. I'm not sure how long's left on his contract, but, you know, if you could get him for around sort of 10 million, it's just worth a go for any club, I think, to try and get something out of him. And if you could get him on loan, the same situation. And I agree with you, in a market that will not have much cash flying around because of COVID, having players like Nelson as sweeteners to deals will make a difference for Arsenal. But it'd be interesting to see what happens with him. I think for me, he needs to really leave this summer and either on loan or permanently, because just for his own career, he's stalled so much, and it just seems a waste.
Yeah, it really does seem like a waste. It really, really does. But at least there's rumors going around that he may be going somewhere. So I think that that's positive. And I know that some people will say, like, you know, I think me and Io have talked about that. Io's in the chat box. He should be. I think I've seen him comment a couple of times that, you know, maybe it's just he really wants to play for Arsenal. You know, that there is a big chance that, or a chance that that's really what he wants. And if that is what he wants, then he has to go out on loan, prove himself. And then I can't imagine that Arteta's love for Nelson just dissipates. You know, sometimes maybe you just need to, maybe it's just different, you know. So I'm hoping for him. I really, really am. I'm hoping that he gets something. But you guys get your questions in. We'll do a couple minutes of questions for Simon, questions for MK, questions for me if you care, you know, what I have to say, you know. But Lone Star, I haven't seen you in a while. Where you been? But Lone Star asks, can we offload 10 players? We need to, got to, sell to buy. I mean, I don't think 10 is what we can do, but what do you guys think? Like, give me 4 names of players that you think can potentially go this season or this summer. Just 4, because I think that's doable. 4. You know, we already know, like, Guendouzi, Xhaka. Who else? MK, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, those 2 for sure. I think Bellerin. I think we probably are going to see the departure of Lacazette as well. And it's possible we could see Leno if something comes in for him. Again, I'm not saying that I would want to sell Leno at this point, especially since I think that ban for Onana is probably going to go into February, because I took my wife's pills. Does not seem a very compelling argument. But, you know, so I think that, yeah, I think, you know, those certainly the ones you've mentioned. Yeah, I think, yeah, Xhaka, Guendouzi, Bellerin, probably Lacazette, and Willian. Yeah, Willian too. You got to just ship him off to MLS, please. I don't care. You know, I will crowdfund the ticket to get him out of here. I'm sure we all would. Goodbye. Probably one of the worst signings I think I could think of. I think worse, as someone said in chat, worse than Mkhitaryan for sure. Mkhitaryan was a necessary evil to get, you know, Alexis moved along, but I don't know.
Simon, can you think of anybody else? I mean, I could think of off the top of my head, probably Kolasinac. You know, he's got to go, right?
I mean,
right.
Louise is already gone. So, I mean, that's one gone. I think Kolasinac would have been very easy to do if Schalke had stayed up. It's going to be a bit harder now, but because they'd be relic. But I think he could probably still end up there, but it's going to be financially probably a bit messier for Arsenal. I mean, 4 players who I think are easy to get rid of in terms of you'll easily find buyers for them. I think Lacazette you'll find a buyer for quite easily. I think Xhaka will be quite easy to find a buyer for. I think Leno you could find a buyer for quite easily, and I think Bellerin you could as well. But I mean, beyond that, you could almost see 10 players going. I mean, you could easily see Nketiah go as well. You could see Willian go as well. You could see Guendouzi, Torreira.
Maybe 10.
Willock,
maybe 10 can happen.
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, Willock could go as well. Maitland-Niles could go as well. I mean, that's already 10. Nelson's 11. So it's quite easy to. I mean, Maitland-Niles is someone we sort of forget about, but Cedric, there you go, 30. But Maitland-Niles is someone you sort of forget about. But I thought Allardyce was actually spot on when he was talking about it at the end of the season, saying, if I was him, I'd go back to Arsenal and I'd play wherever Arteta told me to, because I look at that right back slot and what Chambers did for the final 10 games and think that could have been you, Ainsley, quite easily.
That's what he was doing when Arteta first came in. He was playing that pseudo midfielder role. He would fit in so perfectly. I actually watched our FA Cup final over just yesterday randomly. Maitland-Niles was brilliant in that game. Absolutely brilliant. I think the guy, he's so an Arsenal player. Like, I wish he would just come back, and I wish he'd just be accepted back. But if he doesn't want to play right back, then it just is what it is. But he's somebody that I would be okay with coming back if he just wanted to play that right back.
I think, because I think he's also made a lot of pretty costly mistakes as well. And I mean, we'll see what kind of player he comes back as an improved player. But certainly I think in terms of the areas that we need to target, just to have squad players there, I think that he is certainly someone that you would put in that conversation.
Man, I think he can improve. I really think he's stunting his own growth by wanting to do the midfield thing. But here's another question by Deborah Ducky. Is Simon MK Jess traveling to Florida for the prestigious Florida Cup? I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm going. And you guys, you have to know that, like, Orlando is probably my least favorite place in the world, like by a long shot, so, but I'm going to go. MK, why the instant no?
Florida?
Going? Yeah. Is it Florida? It's just Florida.
I have family there. I can't think of any place I'd rather travel to less in the middle of the summer than Florida. It's a swamp. It's 95 degrees at 10 a.m. and I can't do that. Like, maybe if it were in the fall, the Florida Cup, or the winter, I'd be like, yeah, we could get down with going to Florida. But like in the middle of the summer, and just like, I'm also going to be in New York for like a month. I'm going back to where I grew up. So just no plans to travel. So yeah, too hot.
Simon, this is a question for you. Is there any truth in the Menor Solomon rumor? Do you know?
Not that I've heard. I know he's been. I think he might have himself been pretty vocal about his desire to come to Arsenal, and certainly people from his side. It's not something I've heard of, and I think he might be a player that Arsenal like. But I think, as we've sort of discussed over the past 40 minutes or so, there's so much to do before bringing in another winger could be on your list. But it doesn't feel like one for me that should be a priority, really.
Yeah, I've only seen a little bit of him, to be honest, and he would be probably like the last thing I'd be looking at, to be honest, as well, because like you've already said, he's a winger and it is what it is, but it's been going around. So I don't know. People don't seem really excited about it either. Philastanak asks, who's going to be our deadline or transfer this season? I mean, I'm not going to lie. I was on the Thomas Partey roller coaster last year. I was on it. I was up. I was down. He's not coming. He's coming. He's not coming. He's coming. And all the way to the very end. I loved every minute of it. Call me crazy. But if you guys could just give a wild guess, who's going to be our transfer deadline, day transfer or whatever this season?
I mean, hopefully they're not doing any business on transfer deadline day.
We're going to do at least one on the transfer deadline day.
I mean, I feel like it could be like a Reiss Nelson or a Maitland-Niles sort of type. I kind of feel like that will be one that I just get a feeling there'll be like a promoted club, someone like a Brentford or a Norwich, or on that deadline day, who suddenly just come in and take them on loan or permanent deal. But Arsenal need, well, we know the amount of work they've got to do. We talk about the players they've got to get rid of. They can't afford to be scrambling around in August trying to get things done. So. But yeah, I could see like a Reiss Nelson maybe. That would be
randomly at the end. MK, a question for you. What is the minimum expectation for Arsenal next season? Top 4, top 6?
I mean, I think that you need to look at what other clubs did, and you have to look at top 4 as your aspirations. You have nothing else really other than domestic cup competitions. That's got to be your focus. I'm sorry, returning to the Europa League just isn't where we need to be. And we've failed to win it now multiple times. And you need to get into the Champions League to attract the kinds of talent you need if you're going to be a self-sustaining club. That's it. Top 4. We have to look at, I'm tired of getting bantered by Chelsea fans, other people that are, you're living in the past. And, I remember watching Arsenal in high school, as you just remember too, and like we were the same age, like we watched the Invincibles and stuff. And it's like, you think that that's where we were to finishing, trying to qualify for a 3rd-tier UEFA tournament. No, we need to move on, and top 4 for sure.
Yeah, my hope would be top 4, but my expectation will always depend on who comes and who goes. Last summer, I predicted 8th through 10th based on our transfer window, and people laughed at me. They were like, "Are you serious? Look at our team." I was like, "Our team doesn't play on paper. It doesn't play on paper." And it was imbalanced. We didn't have a creative midfielder. I knew Ozil would not play, and when you can't give Aubameyang the ball, how are you going to score goals? Because at that point, we hadn't figured out another way to score. So that's what I predicted. But I'm hoping for more, obviously. But it would definitely depend on what we did over the summer. How about this nonsense rumor about Sterling as a marquee signing? Simon, what is the likelihood of us signing Raheem Sterling from Manchester City this summer?
I mean, that for me feels like one where, you could say you'd want to sign Raheem Sterling. If you asked any club, would you want to sign Raheem Sterling? Of course they're going to say, yeah. I can't see Sterling wanting to come from Manchester City to Arsenal. I think if anything, it's an indication that Arsenal obviously want to do some form of marquee signing, which they probably need to do. But for me, just his wages alone, I think he's on certainly Aubameyang levels of pay. And I just can't see that deal ever happening. But they can dream. But for me, even again, it's not the priority that, a bit like we spoke about Manor Solomon. A winger is not should not be Arsenal's priority in this transfer window. That should be, a luxury thing that they're doing at the end of it. If they went and spent 60, 70 million pounds on another winger, when you've just got to the point at the end of the season where you've gone, right, Saka and Pepe, these guys look like our wingers, and then you went and bought Sterling for 60 million, I think the fans would probably be well within their rights to be annoyed about that.
And he'd probably just turn into another luxury player at that too. I just don't think, I think wherever he winds up, that's going to be the case. He's already not in good form. I just don't think you're getting the Raheem Sterling that you think you'd be getting. And I just think that that's just peak silly season. There was one paper or two of them that said we were linked to both Mahrez and Sterling. I'm like, what is this? No way. Not even one of them. I'm sorry. Like, that's just crazy.
I think we're missing the key to this is, Raheem Sterling is too young. He's only like 25, 26. We have to wait another 6-7 years, and then he'll be ready.
Let's wait till he's 31, and then he'll get 3.
Right, then we can go.
Then he's perfect. He's right there.
Deadline day.
So I think, so I need to explain my Gabriel Jesus thing from yesterday, because I just feel like I have to explain. So yesterday I said why we would need Jesus, and they just ran with it and made it a Jesus joke. So it wasn't about Jesus, like our Lord and Savior. It was about Gabriel Jesus. And out of all of the players from Manchester City that could potentially be leaving, he's probably the only one that I'd consider. And you're probably like, well, why, Jessica? He doesn't score goals? And I'm like, because he's a better Lacazette. He's a faster, more technically gifted Lacazette. And the way that our striker plays is not necessarily just a goal scorer, they're a facilitator. And if you want to move to a 4-3-3, he's the type of striker you'd probably need. Now, he still doesn't score goals. For me, it's a confidence issue with him. It always has been. I don't think he's not a bad player, but when you're playing under Sergio Aguero, who's arguably one of the best strikers, a lot of people, if you ask them, especially if they've never watched Thierry Henry play, in the Premier League era, they would probably say Sergio Aguero has been the best striker in the last 10 years. So we're talking about playing under the best guy and then playing under Pep, who's constantly trying to rejig his structure not to have to play with a number 9 at all. So for me, it's a confidence thing with him. The price probably would be out of the range, but if you offered me Gabriel Jesus, I would take him. He's probably the only one that I would take. Mahrez, No, but this is all in fantasy. But I just had to. I know that's why you're making fun of me, Newman. It's because of the Jesus joke, and that's just so not what I meant. But yeah, you guys. I think we'll end it there. This is a really good stream. We went through a lot of different things, you know. But I want to thank Simon for being here, and I know you're, you know, doing your thing. It's probably really busy for you for transfer season and all that kind of stuff. So I want to thank you for being here and let everybody know where they can find you on the internet.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I've really enjoyed it. You can find me on Twitter at @SR_Collings. And you can read my stuff on standard.co.uk/sports. So, yeah, hopefully it's going to be an eventful transfer window. I mean, it hasn't actually officially opened yet, and we've already peaked silly season. So we're off to a good start.
Typical. I mean, if it wasn't silly season, I think we'd be questioning it. But yeah, thank you. And hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Bye. All right, MK, it's been awesome. It's always awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Let everybody know where they can find you. And before you go, are you guys going to be doing things at the Fox and the Hound?
We're going to hope to do some Euro watch parties, I think. I mean, we all support different European clubs. So, you know, we'll see. But I think we're expecting to. We're also expecting to launch our website and a new merch line as well. So exciting things to come for those local to Los Angeles. So yeah, should be fun.
Awesome. So you guys, if you don't know, MK is a part of Arsenal Los Angeles, and they do cool stuff in LA for people like me to, you know, have a community of Arsenal fans like around here. So MK is awesome. And if you guys don't see her here, you might see her on the Highbury squad, and you can follow her on Twitter at MK Liebman.
Yes.
Liebman. Mm-hmm. All right. So I will see you soon. Bye, MK.
Sounds good. Bye.
All right, you guys, that's it for the stream. I really enjoyed this one. I think it was a lot of fun, and we went through a lot of things. At 10 p.m. UK time, we will be doing the headline show, where we're going to take the top 3 or 4 headlines for today in Arsenal land, football land, all those types of things, and just discuss them. And then I'll have my famous one question at the very, very end. So make sure that you join me then. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I mean, this has been a really good stream. I had so much fun. And I just want to thank you guys for always supporting me, liking, sharing, subscribing, and all those things. I'll see you at 10 p.m. UK time. Bye, guys.